Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Shelly, and today I'm going to be talking about the next video in my series of videos about the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2022. I am cherry picking from this list, and this is a prize that I am somewhat dedicated to following this year. Again, I'm sort of cherry picking from the long list. The short list is actually going to come out in a few weeks, and I'll have a video of what I think will move on. But right now, let's actually get into the book I'm supposed to be talking about, and that is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. So this book entered my consciousness when it was longlisted for the Booker in 2021, and then it proceeded to be shortlisted for the Booker in 2021, though it didn't win. This book I want to say that I kind of dismissed this book, and a lot of it is for its length. This is a 608-page book. But then I became even more intrigued and fascinated by this novel in particular when it showed up on the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And that's when I was like, okay, this book is getting quite a bit of buzz, and so I think it's time for me to read it. Great Circle is probably most known for its dual timeline. There is a timeline set in the past that is following Miriam Graves, with an N on the end. And we meet her actually before she is born. We find out the tragic circumstances in which her and her brother Jamie are come into this world and sort of get to the place where they spend their childhood, which is in Washington with their uncle Wallace. And that's kind of where we begin Miriam's story. Now, from a very early age, she is a go-getter, kind of a spitfire, and she decides very early on that she is going to be a pilot. Now, a pilot in the early 1900s is kind of unheard of. We haven't even seen Amelia Earhart with her flying expedition or extravaganza, if you will. And so Miriam is sort of this very odd outlier, somebody who wants to be a female pilot and is really got a lot of gumption to boot. Let's just say that. And she definitely has her mind set on it and is almost like she's willing to do almost anything to achieve this goal, which is a really awesome premise, right? The other timeline that we're following is that of an actress. Her name is Hadley Baxter, and she definitely feels like someone who has stepped out of the Twilight era. She's a tween star. She is huge, at least in this novel. She's this huge, massive household name of an actress, and we're watching her kind of flounder in her career as she has recently decided to play Miriam Graves in an upcoming movie that she's doing. So we have these two timelines, and they are definitely working in conjunction with each other, and they're connected very clearly in a small way, seeing that Hadley Baxter is playing Miriam Graves, and then we are also following Miriam Graves' timeline and her life. And actually that's really what most of the book is about. So Miriam Graves' timeline, it's really written in third person, and that third person writing, it's third person omniscient, and we are following different characters throughout. So for the majority of the time, I would say that we're following Miriam, and we're following her choices, and who she's falling in love with, and the way that she's trying to achieve becoming a pilot, and we're following this story, and we're watching her develop and unfold. But we're also following her very sensitive brother, who wants to be an artist. We're following her Uncle Wallace, who is indecisive and sometimes makes choices that I don't agree with, but we're definitely following, his timeline as well. And we're following Miriam's childhood friend, Caleb, who definitely gets mixed up in the bunch in some ways or another. And so we have this whole fully fleshed out, formed world with these wonderful characters and this gorgeous setting of Washington. Though the novel definitely moves around in setting, but there is a good portion of it set in Washington. And so, like I said, it's third person omniscient, and we're fine. This world just feels so well realized and so well developed, and every character feels like they're fully fleshed out and absolutely brimming with roundness and possibility. They feel real, right? So this first timeline is this gorgeous historical fiction setting that really sucked me in and really got me kind of invested in the characters. Now you contrast that with Hadley Baxter's story. And this is the storyline set in 2014 following this really over-the-top actress that really felt like I was reading Maggie Shipstead's idea of what a big actress would act like. Not what an actual big actress acts like, but what we assume from behind, like sitting in our chairs watching these actresses rise and fall with not any grace at all. I felt like that's the perspective that Maggie Shipstead was giving, and so I really didn't have a lot of empathy towards Hadley. Also, the writing style changes. Hadley's sections are all written in first person, so this was my experience. I was reading this gorgeous story about Miriam and her rebellion and her gumption and her desire to become a pilot and the ups and downs of her life, and I was so invested in her world and in her character. And then I felt like I was ripped from this storyline, this really beautiful historical fiction novel that I was definitely buying into and getting, and I was placed into a really, really bad contemporary fiction novel with a main character that I couldn't connect with, I didn't feel sorry for, I wasn't invested in, and to be honest, felt like a cardboard character of what a big actress would act like. Thankfully, we're spending the majority of our timeline with Miriam Graves in her world, which feels just so fleshed out and so well realized and well imagined and well written that when we switched to the Hadley parts, I would almost kind of speed through and just kind of get those parts out of the way in order to get back to the Miriam Graves timeline. And I also did I clung to the hope that Hadley Baxter's story might end up opening up or resolving in a way that was very satisfactory. That is not the experience that I had. I will say though, this book has a very This Is Us quality to it. This Is Us is a television show that uses time in a very interesting way. Often This Is Us, the television show, will kind of flash forward and you'll get a glimpse of the future, which sometimes gives you the last piece of the puzzle to the current storyline, and it's really, really satisfying. And in that same way, Great Circle worked like that. So Miriam Graves, her storyline was great, her story was wonderful, it has a wonderful story arc. I really, really enjoyed her story. And then there's the Hadley Baxter story. And I was like, okay, I don't like you. But whenever Hadley Baxter's storyline revealed something about Miriam Graves, I found that very satisfying. And so I wasn't completely angry or upset or annoyed at that future timeline, so much so that I was like, they need to cut it out and it needs to not even exist and bleh, no, why did you even put it in there, Maggie Shipstead? Instead, it was like, okay, I didn't really like that storyline, but I can appreciate the nuggets of information that reveals things about Miriam's story that I was really connected with, and that illuminated some of what happened to her and some of her secrets that are eventually revealed. When that would happen, the storyline, the future storyline definitely worked for me, but it was hit and miss, and I don't know, there was just there was so much that was good about it, and then it was and then we get to Hadley Baxter, and I was like, okay. I finished this in a matter of 5 days. I picked it up and I couldn't put it down. It sucked me in right away. And when you have an experience like that, even when there is something that doesn't work for you, you can still appreciate the novel as a whole. And that's where I'm ending this. I really enjoyed this novel. Now, as far as historical fiction goes, I will say this. It is not purple prosy, and it doesn't have weird writing in it. There is definitely a subset of historical fiction works that have just absolutely odd writing in it, or out of the box writing, or writing that you've just not quite encountered before. I'm really talking about Wolf Hall. I'm mostly talking about the entire Wolf Hall trilogy by Hilary Mantel. And so as far as historical fiction goes, this is more just straight up wonderful, lovely, beautiful historical fiction versus weird and kind of out of the box historical fiction. So this is definitely more of a historical fiction read that I would say is akin to The Red Tent, where it is extremely character driven and you're taking a story and just making everyone feel very alive in that setting and in that world. So The Great Circle definitely reads more like The Red Tent than Wolf Hall. But I would say that if you are a fan of historical fiction writing, if you like just solid stories that are really good from start to finish, I would highly recommend this. I would also recommend it to anybody who wants to read about a character with a lot of gusto, a lot of gumption. I would definitely read Great Circle, and I would recommend it to those who are interested in flying. Now, if you're like, but that contemporary timeline, that might be for me. Yeah, it might be for you, but just know that it's really this, in my mind, it's the supporting role for the main story that is Miriam Graves. So that's it for me. I am going to do a predictions for the shortlist, the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist predictions. I'm gonna have that coming out soon-ish, definitely before the shortlist is announced. But yeah, so thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.